The film opens with an Army Ranger, Cameron, who returns home for vacations. He surprises his pregnant wife, Trisha, who works at a cheap bar in Alabama. He gets bothered by a drunk Army hater there, who later attacks him outside with his buddies. Cameron retaliates in self-defense, but seals his fate when he accidentally kills one of them. Scenes cut directly to Cameron's court hearing, in which he's sentenced to serve a decade in the federal penitentiary with parole. In prison, Cameron remains on his best behavior and befriends a decent guy named Baby O. 8 years later, Cameron's released on parole. His parole day is the same day as Casey's birthday, so he gets her a stuffed bunny. As he shares his excitement about being released with Baby O, the prison decides to transfer some of their worst prisoners to populate a new prison in Alabama, under the supervision of U.S. Marshal Vince. As the prisoners are being transported to the airport, we see Cameron among those prisoners. The female guard, Bishop, tells him he will only be tagging along up till the prison in Alabama and will be released from there. Back at the airport, a drug enforcement agent named Duncan pulls up in his car and persuades Vince to let one of his agents disguise among prisoners to squeeze some information out of them. Vince lets the agent borrow some prison clothes and takes him to the control room. There, Vince argues with Duncan about the weapon policy and makes sure the agent is free of weapons. As the prisoners are loaded on the plane one by one, Vince introduces their names and crimes to the agent. 2 of the prisoners happen to be Cameron and Baby O. When it's time for the agent to board the plane, Duncan sneakily shoves a gun in his clothes. On the plane, Guard Felsen dictates some ground rules during the flights, during which a prisoner spits on him. He puts a bag over his head and gets him beaten up for that. 2 dangerous prisoners, Cyrus and Nathan, are caged separately. Cyrus engages with a rapist prisoner named Johnny and even bothers Felsen. While the plane takes off, Vince is sure nothing will go wrong. Opposite to his beliefs, Cyrus and Nathan secretly take out pointy pins from their palm skin and begin unlocking their cuffs. Cyrus also signals his restrained partner, Pinball, to begin his work. He pulls a vial of propane and a match from his stomach, using which he sets his fellow prisoner on fire to cause a diversion. When he's escorted from there, he opens Nathan's cage, who immediately kills a guard with his cuffs and rains chaos on the plane. All the prisoners free themselves, including Simon, who puts a gun to the pilot's head and hijacks the plane. Vince in the control room worries, but the prisoners prevent Vince from knowing the truth. Meanwhile, Johnny intends to make Bishop his next victim. Simon lectures Johnny and frees Bishop. Nathan tells the prisoners to comply as the plane is about to drop off some prisoners on the next stop. Simultaneously, the DEA agent panics and uses his gun to hold Pinball hostage. Simon ends up shooting the agent using the pilot's gun. Soon, they realize that 3 out of the 6 prisoners that were to get off at the next stop are already dead. While Simon finds out from the pilot about a hailstorm during the landing, the prison guards discover something dubious in Simon's cell. Simon plans on replacing the dead prisoners with the alive ones to stay out of doubt. Cameron is also selected among them. He lies to Simon about not wanting to go as he has to serve 15 more years. Simon agrees on letting him stay and tells him to help get the guards' uniforms. While taking off the guard's uniform, he discovers an activated tape recorder. He puts the recorder in one of the prisoners' pockets so the police can find it later and act against them. Meanwhile, the cops find Simon's escape plan along with the plane's blueprints, so he immediately informs Vince. On the other hand, Simon and his imposter get off the plane with their faces covered to deliver the prisoners. Side by side, Vince connects the dots. A prisoner called the Swamp Thing is all set to be their new pilot. He rewires the plane's transmitter and hands it to Pinball. Pinball hides it in a private airplane parked at the airport and activates it to mislead the control room. He almost gets caught by the staff worker there, but he lies about being a cop and gets away with it. Simon and his buddies become baffled to see the cops delivering a prisoner to them in return. It turns out to be Garland Green, the infamous Marietta Mangler. He's strapped with a metal jacket and a face mask. Back at the prison, Vince decodes that they're headed to Carson City and runs to report that. In his absence, the guards open up a box, which activates a bomb and kills them all. Meanwhile, Simon watches the prison buses leave and their policemen go away. Simultaneously, the guards discover the tape and tell the police officer to stall the fake plane guards so they can show up with the backup. They also plan on contacting Vince. Simon senses their plan and kills the policeman before fleeing. The Swamp Thing flies the plane. Pinball runs after them but gets squished under the tires and gets stuck in the landing gear. Subsequently, the other plane with the transmitter takes off too. When the news gets to Vince and Duncan, they fight and pin the blame on one another. Simon and his fleet uncuff Garland and finally communicate with Vince, who wants to know their rendezvous point. Simon only makes him mad with his sarcasm. He tells Cameron the actual rendezvous point and slams the cockpit door on his face, while another U.S. Marshal is sent to approach Trisha and her daughter, who are waiting to welcome Cameron at the airport. He offers them a ride on his jet. Back on the plane, Cameron tries to put Nathan against Cyrus by pointing out he's a black man taking orders from a white folk, but Nathan doesn't take offense. Cameron returns to Baby O and watches Garland staring at them. Meanwhile, Vince brings Cameron's files to the table and reveals he's an Army Ranger sentenced for self-defense. He knows through Felsen that Cameron planted the recorder, so he thinks of contacting him somehow and making him their alibi. However, Duncan views all of the prisoners and calls in his attack choppers to bomb the entire plane. The warden also teams up with Duncan, leaving Vince behind. Up next, Swamp Thing alerts of the plane's landing gear slowing their speed, so Simon appoints Nathan to check it out. Nathan is illiterate and unaware, so he sends Cameron to check it. Cameron discovers Pinball's body stuck in the gear. Nathan makes him toss the corpse out of the emergency exit. Cameron quickly writes their original landing location on his shirt and addresses it to Vince. When Pinball falls from the sky and drops over a car, he's instantly reported to the cops. Cameron is suspected by the prisoners, but he gets away with his lies. Now Vince meets Trisha, who's flown all the way to him. While comforting her, he's reported on Pinball's body situation. He discovers the real location and alerts Duncan he's headed in the wrong direction. He doesn't believe him, assuming Vince is misleading him. Left with no option, Vince steals his car and drives to the location. Simultaneously, a prisoner roams around the cargo section and discovers Cameron's reality through his parole letter. Before he tells this to Simon, Cameron attacks him and doesn't stop until he brutally kills him. As Duncan and his choppers hover over the wrong plane, Garland pushes Cameron's button by accusing him of enjoying killing people. Now Vince reaches the airport junkyard before the prisoners and starts looking around. Simon's plane soon makes a crash landing there.
Lunar Tower, do you copy?
Lunar Tower, answer me. I am landing.
Simon decides to kill all the prisoners, but Cameron saves them by pretending to be cruel like them and suggesting they should keep the prisoners to enslave them. Simon agrees and gets them to start shoveling the sand beneath the plane. Cameron goes to collect some medical stuff from the tent. Johnny uses binoculars to see the attack choppers approaching them and alerts his gang. While Garland finds an abandoned girl at a distance and sits down with her. Meanwhile, Cameron gets ambushed by some bandits. While he fights them, he faces Vince. He points his gun at Vince too. Vince tells him about flying Trisha to their facility, so he calms down and tells Vince to abort his plan as he has to rescue the innocent people on the plane. Cameron keeps looking around while the prisoners push the airplane through ropes before the military arrives. Meanwhile, Garland has disassociated himself from the plan and is bonding with the little girl. Vince and Cameron witness one of the prisoners successfully coming out with a new plane. Vince quickly sabotages him with a crane claw. The plane crashes into a petrol pump and causes a huge leak. Simon gets so disappointed at the man that he throws a lit cigarette in his direction and causes a huge explosion. They retreat and steal police weaponry from the locked plane chamber and devise a plan to take down the convoy headed in their direction. Garland has now disappeared with the girl. While Cameron is still searching for medical supplies, he witnesses that the prisoners have started shooting at the propane tanks to welcome the convoy. Huge explosions take place, trapping the convoy. Cameron struggles to make his way to the plane. Where Johnny is trying to get his hands on Bishop. Thankfully, Cameron gets back on the plane and beats Johnny up. Nathan and the others go crazy with the weapons, while Vince shields himself in a bulldozer. Soon, their plane starts, and they take off. Garland magically appears on the plan, revealing he spared the little girl. Simon starts suspecting there's a mole in them. He threatens to shoot Bishop if the mole doesn't come forward. Baby O takes the blame for reporting to the cops and gets shot. Cameron becomes heartbroken as he takes his last breaths in his arms. He becomes rogue and starts beating up Simon's men, so he holds Casey's bunny hostage to stop him. Alongside, the military helicopters catch up to them and open attack. Cameron gets to the cockpit to communicate with Vince through the radio. He begs Vince to hold his fire as he has the situation under control. Vince's appeal is overruled, and the helicopters continue to fire and damage the plane. When they realize it's about to crash in the city, they stop. The prisoners also make the emergency landing before the plane crashes. While the police arrest the prisoners, Simon gets away on a fire truck. Cameron and Vince chase him on police scooters. Cameron gets on the truck and physically fights Simon to get the bunny back from him. During their fight, the truck crashes and catches fire. Simon is killed in the ruins, while Cameron jumps with his bunny. There, he runs to Trisha and meets Casey for the first time. He gives her the bunny and bonds with her. The police issue his bail immediately for helping them. Meanwhile, Garland is seen gambling in a casino. Here the movie ends. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe for more awesome recaps.